You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills Guys at the Bills Guys on Twitter. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. And I'll tell you what, Dave, it's not real football because it's not NFL football, but football was back on full display this weekend at the collegiate ranks. We had 4 days of just wonderful college football, capped off last night with that. Actually, there's a game right now, Clemson, Georgia Tech. I don't count that game. Anytime Georgia Tech plays, it's not real football, and I just don't like Clemson, so we're going to ignore that one. But last night was capped off with what I thought wasn't a very good game. Like, it was like a really bad game, but all of the mistakes made it like a insanely watchable football game between LSU and Florida State. So an interesting slate of college football to get us warmed up for Thursday when the Buffalo Bills, of all teams, still surreal, kick off the NFL season. But what were your thoughts on this college football weekend as we start to prepare ourselves for Thursday?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, it started off, I mean, for me, Saturday was the day, noon, early start for the Wolfpack in ECU. We never play well there. Managed to escape with a victory, probably didn't deserve it. And then at the same time, you know, our biggest rival, UNC, is up at App State, and that was a wild finish as well. So some cool wild finishes there in the ACC for a couple of the local teams here for me, but it was nice just to get the football back in the air and like you know it's back in the air because it's like nonstop game after game, multiple games going on at the same time. So that was a nice feeling. And it is also a nice feeling that we don't have to wait as long for the opener this year in a way as we normally do. But it is coming up quick, man. It's Labor Day weekend, right? So like Monday we're off. And it's like tomorrow's Tuesday. Like we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there. I kind of need work to come back to distract me until Thursday night. But it's so weird that the first 2 weeks of the NFL season, like I have no idea how, and I have to figure it out over the course of the next 2 weeks how Sunday Ticket works this year. I'm not sure if it's still with DirecTV or what the deal is. I don't know how I'll be watching Bills games this year that aren't primetime games, but thankfully I have 3 weeks to figure that out.
It's still DirecTV. It's still DirecTV for this season.
Okay.
And I think,
all right.
Yeah. And then the Thursday night games, you'll still be able to use that.
Yeah.
Thursday night games are on Amazon Prime, I believe. But as far as like the out of market, non-nationally televised, it's still DirecTV Sunday Ticket this year.
Yeah, we got, and it's going to be surreal pretty much too. Just getting to spend our first 2 Sundays watching Red Zone Channel and getting to scout our like future opponents and just actually get to like enjoy football games instead of the nerve wrackingness that is a Buffalo Bills game. Those games will obviously be played the first 2 weeks in isolation with no other games going on, with the exception of that Monday game when the Vikings and the Eagles kick off late. But Caleb Schmidt coming in here saying, "Do you guys watch any Gators Utah?" I watched a lot of football this weekend, caught some of that. He said Anthony Richardson is a very exciting prospect to watch. I was watching prospects galore this weekend. I was having a lot of fun getting to know some of it's so much more difficult now in college football with guys transferring everywhere. So it was fun to see who the heck is where now. I learned that some guys transferred that I didn't know transferred. So that was interesting to find out when I heard their names called, catching touchdowns or rushing for touchdowns for certain teams. So get used to that as we start to prepare for the next draft. But I had some people chirping at me on Twitter that it was too soon. It's never too soon to talk NFL draft, but we will not talk about it today after this as we get into our show today. Today's going to be a fun show. We're going to talk about some over-unders and some sort of prop bets for the Buffalo Bills season. I have some Bills injury news, some depth chart news I want to walk through to lead off the show today. And we're going to make our NFL season predictions. So who wins the AFC East? Do the Bills get to the Super Bowl? We're going to make some of those predictions tonight. And we want you guys to make your predictions for this NFL season along with us. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick super chat shout out here. Remember, this is the last day before our super chat giveaway. So if you at any point during today's show, hit us up with a super chat. First of all, it guarantees that any topic you want discussed or question you want answered, it makes sure that they get read. It pops up in big highlighted colors. But other than that, you also earn a chance to win a 26 shirt from 26 Shirts. So Thursday during our pregame show, we will be raffling off all of our super chatters who have super chatted over the past month and a half. We'll be raffling off your choice of a 26 shirt. So we'll be doing that on Thursday. So today's your last day to get on that. And as always, we are presented by and sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. Hand-cut cup and char pepperonis. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you are an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, so let's get this kicked off this evening. Some Buffalo Bills injury news I want to start off with. Tommy Doyle, Quentin Morris are not practicing. They were DNP the last 2 days, working off to the side at Buffalo Bills practice. Not likely going to see Tommy Doyle or Quentin Morris on Thursday, if I had to make a guesstimation at this point. Jordan Poyer, Isaiah McKenzie, Tim Settle have all been full participants. So it seems like the most important players of this football team that were battling through some stuff, they will be back just in time for the start of this season. What are your thoughts on some of this early Buffalo Bills injury news?
Yeah, I mean, the big 3 there with the fulls, I mean, that's kind of what, your attention should be drawn to, right? I mean, Quentin Morris had that injury kind of right before cut down, and it was a question maybe of whether or not that might maybe cost him a roster spot. It obviously did not, but knowing sort of the injury and how he kind of, had to be taken off the field and that type of thing, like, it's not a surprise to me that he's starting off the week with a DNP. And I agree with you. It would be a stretch probably to see him play on Thursday at this point. Tommy Doyle, same type of thing. Again, I'm not, we talked about this 4 weeks ago, right? Like, Spencer Brown needed to be ready to go for week 1. He's going to be ready. That kind of softens the blow a bit here for Tommy Doyle being out in the case that you need sort of that backup tackle. You've got Quessenberry there. You've got Dawkins and you've got Spencer Brown. So I think for one game, you're going to be okay there. And Spencer Brown, obviously a full go, not on the injury report. So that was something that, not that I was expecting him to be on it, but it was just a little curious to see how they were going to treat, some of these guys, if they were going to limit them at all early in practice and put him on the injury report. But by and large, the injury report to start the week, very, very small, which is what you hope to be the case going into week 1. So, really positive overall on the injury report. And obviously the big ones, Poyer, McKenzie, and Tim Settle, also an underrated big one as well, I think, being full.
Yeah. Tim Settle was the guy who had missed a ton of practice since that he got hurt in that preseason game. He played that second week preseason game, and he hadn't really been on the practice field. So that was one that was sort of like under the radar, iffy.
Weren't sure about it. Yeah.
Weren't sure about it. Now there's some clarity. It's good to hear. I'll tell you what, like, I always just expected Jordan Poyer back for week 1. And then I saw the videos of him still wearing that giant thing on his arm. And I'm like, man, was I, over reliant or over sort of zealous about Jordan Poyer being ready for week 1? But it looks like he'll be week 1. And I think Caleb Schmidt is all of us in Bills Mafia right now. And he says, I'm just happy McKenzie's going to be playing on Thursday. I'm excited to watch him in his new role. 100%. I think most of Bills Mafia, I mean, he's the face of the franchise, right? Isaiah McKenzie, he's almost universally most people's favorite player. So watching him get a chance to take over that Cole Beasley role, get possibly a majority of the snaps in the slot. We won't know that's the case until we actually see it when live bullets are flying, but all signs indicate Isaiah McKenzie's going to have a big role in this offense as sort of the Cole Beasley replacement in the slot. So it'll be interesting to see that come to fruition on Thursday and get to see him make his mark and his stamp on the National Football League. The Bills also released their first depth chart. Spencer Brown was the starting right tackle. That was one that really stood out. Zach Moss, running back number 2 over James Cook. That stood out to me. Quentin Morris over Tommy Sweeney. Probably not going to see it this week due to injury, but that's something that I was really excited to see on the depth chart. I was worried it would be the other way around. Terrell Bernard over Tyrell Dotson at strong side linebacker was a little bit of a shock. Seeing Dotson as the backup at both Mike and strong side linebacker, that might be the reason. His flexibility might be what's making Dotson the backup there. And then Kyer Elam over Christian Benford, but Leslie Frazier had some interesting comments today that we're going to bring up in a little bit. But what were your thoughts on the release of the Buffalo Bills depth chart? Anything stand out to you? Anything shock you? Anything of that nature?
I thought there was a chance Quessenberry would still would be the starter at right tackle. Knowing that Spencer Brown had missed some time, but to his credit, again, not on the injury report, has practiced for the last several weeks, and the Bills clearly thought that he was primed and ready to go, and also felt that he had earned that spot back from David Quessenberry in the weeks leading up to week 1 after coming back from that injury. And I think that we somewhat lose sight of the fact that like he is, only going to his second year, and the Bills were being probably cautious with him in the early going. And it also kind of leads me to believe that, the first official depth chart that came out from training camp, obviously Quessenberry was listed as the right tackle, but Spencer Brown had also been going through some injury situations there. So I think ideally the Bills wanted Spencer Brown to get healthy, be right, practice, and put him in as the starter in week 1. And that's what happened. So now it's about sustainability for Spencer Brown, right? He's healthy going into week 1. Can he stay healthy for the whole season? We know he's had the back thing pop up. So not a surprise, but a happy kind of surprise, I guess, or a happy thing to see. Terrell Bernard, look, I mean, a 3rd round pick, Tyrell Dodson having that flexibility like that. I'm not too worried about that. And Kyer Elam, again, he was the 1st round draft pick. You traded up for him. I think you raise more questions if you don't list him above Christian Benford, honestly, at this point. So, and obviously Dane Jackson, that makes sense to me. The only guy with real experience now playing.
And
so, yeah.
Kyer Elam too. He doesn't seem like the rookie that needs the kick in the butt, right? He's not the guy who needs to see a name of him in front of the depth chart to motivate him. Everything that we've learned about Kyer Elam since he was drafted by the Buffalo Bills and his process and the way he approaches the game, he doesn't need that. He doesn't need to be kicked in the butt with Christian Benford ahead of him on a depth chart. So if the Bills are trying to play mind games with certain players with the depth chart, certainly Kyer Elam is probably not one of them. Some interesting quotes today surrounding sort of that depth chart when it comes to Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. Leslie Frazier says they will mix it up at cornerback with between Kyer Elam and Christian Benford, opposite of Dane Jackson. He also went on to mention when they asked him why didn't you bring in a veteran, etc. He sort of hinted that Trey White was pretty close to actually making the active roster and being a possibility to actually play week 1. So it appears like maybe we'll only get 4 weeks of that sort of Elam Benford battle for CB2 before we get Trey White starting to get worked back in, possibly week 5, 6, or 8 after the bye week. But what are your thoughts? Do you like the fact that they're going to be maybe rotating some guys there at cornerback, or would you like to just see them pick one and stick to it?
I'm a firm believer, I'm a firm believer in running backs touching the ball more often, gets them into a rhythm. I don't know how. I played cornerback in high school, and I can tell you this: it does matter. It does matter. Like I think being on the field, it does get you into a rhythm, right? And it also gets you just into the flow of the game. Maybe gets you a little bit more cued in on like the reads and anticipation. So I do think there is some truth to getting into a rhythm and not having to be part of a rotation. With that said, this is not a surprise because the Bills have done this in the past with the likes of Josh Norman and Levi Wallace and other rotations. So they're not afraid to go to this sort of rotation. Now, in the past, it was like opposite of Trey White. Now it's opposite of Dane Jackson. Really, I mean, that side of it is unchanged, regardless of whether it was Trey White or Dane Jackson. So it is not a surprise to me. However, I'm wondering if it's because in reality, Christian Benford has played so well in training camp and in practice that they feel like he's earned a shot at real reps in game
Yeah.
action. Also gives them a chance to then get him some experience early in the season, and in a situation down the road where they need him to come in that he's not
Mhm.
super green. So I understand the rationale, but I also think that there is some credence to being able to get into a rhythm for
Mhm.
one guy. So that's just the way the Bills want to do it. We'll see how much they actually do it.
Yeah, a couple interesting comments here. Pamaruta says trade for Levi. First Steelers depth chart came out today, thanks to our guy Ryan Talbot from NY Up from noticing Levi Wallace is a backup behind Cameron Sutton. So Levi Wallace did not crack the starting lineup there in Pittsburgh. Pops Mafia, I think, with a great comment here. He says can't be 100% of the time, but man coverage versus zone coverage needs to be considered when rotating the DBs. So I would guess that maybe Christian Benford is probably a little bit ahead of game in the zone stuff. He was that ball hawk sort of at Villanova. Even though both of these guys were used heavily with man coverage in the preseason. So it'll be interesting to see which one maybe the Buffalo Bills think is stronger in the zone coverage game. Maybe that guy gets some more reps. But again, as he pointed out, it can't be 100% of the time because you don't want to give away what you're doing on defense. But
Right.
that could play into the rotation as well. And then Pops Mafia also comes in. David Questenberry has looked good at right tackle. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. So yeah, he has been listed as the starter. This was the comment from Ken Dorsey today when speaking to the media. Brown starting at right tackle. His play in the preseason was huge because of all his missed time during training camp. So he points to the live reps that he got. He played, I think, 2 series in that final preseason game against Carolina, maybe even 3. I have to go back and double check. He says that went a long way into the Buffalo Bills feeling comfortable that they can start Spencer Brown. Now, Spencer Brown appears to be starting this game for the Buffalo Bills. Do you think he takes every single snap at right tackle against the Los Angeles Rams, or do you think we see some kind of rotation with David Questenberry?
Great question. I think he should take 100% of the snaps, like if he can, right? If he's up for it.
Yeah.
And he got the live reps in the preseason. So assuming his cardio is where it needs to be, which obviously in the first week, that's always like a kind of an interesting topic for not just Spencer Brown, but for players on the Bills and really players across the NFL, is how is the conditioning, right? How is everyone's conditioning heading into week 1? So I think that would be the only reason that he might not take 100% of the snaps. But if he's starting, I would expect him to take 100% of the snaps.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And so one thing I wanted to do before we move on to sort of some of our prop stuff is I want to talk about the Bills inactive list. I saw a couple of Bills inactive projections and a couple of comments in the comment section as well. I posted my prediction on who the Bills inactives will be. And Dave, I want your take to see if you would maybe do some things differently here. So you got to get down to 48. If you carry 8 offensive linemen, you can have up to 48 on game day. So the Bills got to trim 5 guys. My prediction is that Quentin Morris and Tommy Doyle will both be inactive. That is injury based. Tommy Doyle working his way back from the foot injury, Quentin Morris working his way back from the hamstring injury. So there's 2 of the 5 inactives right there. So at this point, can't really inactivate another offensive lineman. I saw Greg Van Roten's name in there. If you do, then you have to get down to like 47 guys instead of 48, et cetera. So that's the way that sort of 48 man rule works. 8 of those guys have to be offensive linemen. My other 3, I think the 2 easiest ones are Balon Spector. It's hard to see them carrying 6 linebackers, Tyrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard, Tyler Medikevich. They should be able to do the special team stuff. Cam Lewis, he's sort of that, I think, break glass in case of emergency cornerback. Saran Neal can back up the nickel. They've got Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, and Dane Jackson on the boundary. So I'm going with Cam Lewis. And then my 5th guy, I went with Jamison Crowder over what a lot of people thought should have been a defensive end or Zach Moss. My reasoning for it is I think Khalil Shakir has earned through the preseason a lot of reps, and I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want to get him on the field. They can work him in the slot. They can also work him in on the boundary. He's also your punt returner, and it opens up that roster spot to carry a 5th defensive end, and it opens up your roster spot to carry Zach Moss for goal line and red zone situations. So I went with Jamison Crowder. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised during the season if he was a break glass in case of emergency wide receiver on this football team. What are your thoughts on my inactive list? What do you agree, disagree with?
I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of it, really. I mean, I hate to kind of, I'd hate to kind of inactivate Jamison Crowder for week 1 because he is a veteran. It'd be nice to kind of have him there as like a calming presence in a game that's going to have tons of people watching, a lot of pressure, obviously. I lean a little bit towards Shaq Lawson here over Crowder, but your justification is sound. I think that if it was me, I'd probably just inactivate Shaq Lawson, but I could also see the Bills wanting to have that kind of extra beef on defense. And I do think that for week 1, I think Zach Moss will be active. Is James Cook's first game in the NFL under the bright lights. Not that he's not used to the bright lights, because obviously Georgia had plenty of eyeballs on them in college, but as a rookie, that's a lot of pressure on him to kind of be there, and there really be no sort of fail safe there other than James Cook. So I have, that's my reason why I think Zach Moss should be active. Whether he actually is active, we'll see. But if it was me, I'd probably just switch out and have Shaq Lawson maybe be the inactive over Crowder. But I'm not gonna none of it's gonna surprise me if it's any 3 of those guys.
And Pamarto comes in, he says Crowder, Spector, Lewis, so he agrees with me there. But then he says Bobby Hart and Tommy Sweeney, maybe over time. But as I mentioned, unless something changes drastically over the next couple of days, Quentin Morris is injured, and so is Tommy Doyle. So Hart and Sweeney will likely see the field on Thursday night unless those guys can come back from injury. Pops Mafia says, I think it'll be AJ Panessa. I don't know. Most of what we've heard in camp has been that he's been the third guy. Like, he has been decent, even though he hasn't shown it in a preseason game. He's had some decent pass rush pop in training camp per most reports. He's been really good against the run per most reports. So as much as we haven't seen it like in a preseason game, most of the reports I'm hearing and what people are saying, like, I'm leaning towards AJ Panessa being the third defensive end in our rotation this year until something happens on the field that changes that. But I think he's going to get the first shot to be that first guy off the bench in that rotation. And that sort of brings you between Shaq Lawson and Boogie Basham, right? I carried both those guys in this game and on my inactive list by inactivating Jamison Crowder. I carried both Boogie Basham and Shaq Lawson. I think if it came down to it and the Bills only wanted to carry 4 defensive ends, I think Boogie Basham gets the sit in week 1. I think if they do carry 4 defensive ends, Boogie Basham is the guy who's going to see the bench because AJ Panessa has shown to be good against the run. Shaq Lawson is also extremely talented at setting the edge and against the run. And what the LA Rams do, even though they don't run the football a lot of what they do is based on the run and based on play action and based on rolling out of the pocket, things like that, sort of generating guys open. I think a lot of what they do is based off of that offensive line. So I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want their 4 strongest defensive ends. And at this point, I think Shaq Lawson would be a stronger bet than a Boogie Basham. Where do you side on this? If it was just one, Boogie or Lawson, who would you go with?
I mean, that's a good point. You're not wrong about how the Rams do set up their offense. I mean, I could see it. I mean, I hadn't considered that till now, but now that you make that point, I would say that it's a really good point. And that wouldn't surprise me. So add his name into the mix, I suppose, of the short list of guys who might be inactive. It'd be very interesting to see if it goes that way, especially because he did, he had that splash play in the preseason against the Colts, obviously, but how much is that going to matter in this particular game against the Rams in week 1? We'll see.
One last thing I wanted to ask about the inactive list. Quentin Morris is obviously out. So we're just naturally assuming Tommy Sweeney will be in. We've talked about this like 12 personnel, this 21 personnel. We've been having these conversations all summer long about the Buffalo Bills implementing this stuff and being serious about putting this stuff in their offense, especially with Aaron Cromer. What percentage chance would you put at Tommy Sweeney and Quentin Morris being inactive for this football game and the Buffalo Bills rolling with one traditional tight end, Dawson Knox, the flex player, and Reggie Gilliam, and possibly calling up a guy off the practice squad if they felt the need to carry another offensive lineman, but more than likely just going with like Moss and Crowder or, Moss and or Crowder and a 5th defensive end. So what do you think about the Bills possibly inactivating Tommy Sweeney and maybe going away from that 12 and 21 stuff that was sort of shoved down our throats this training camp?
Well, I mean, it would have been an interesting proposition if Tommy Doyle had not been on the injury list, right? Because we saw at the end of last season, they kind of used Tommy Doyle as that extra blocking guy in those heavy packages, and Tommy Sweeney was inactive, and they did only activate one sort of true traditional tight end, along with Reggie Gilliam, obviously. But I think it depends on what the Bills are cooking up game plan wise here. If they're trying to, spread the Rams out and kind of maybe operate in the shotgun for most of the game and kind of, 3 wide, 4 wide, 1 tight end, that's a possibility, right? And if they're not too worried about having an extra, that extra blocking sort of guy in there, I mean, it doesn't have to be Tommy Doyle, right? It could be David Quessenberry. It could be someone like that if they really wanted to do something heavy with like a quote 6 offensive lineman and a tight end. It could be Quessenberry. He's had plenty of practice with the ones and probably as a vet would be comfortable playing that type of role. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility, but I guess it just depends on what the Bills are game planning here. And so we'll probably get into that bit more on Thursday, but maybe it's not the 100%, sharpied in as we kind of think it is.
Speaking of game planning for Thursday, and we'll get to this more on Thursday, I want your quick thoughts here on a comment that stood out to me from Ken Dorsey on James Cook. When asked about James Cook and how he'll sort of be implemented in the offense, this was the comment that Ken Dorsey gave. To be honest, that is something that just unfolds naturally over the course of the game. That, as in James Cook's role, it will just naturally unfold over the course of the game. Are you buying that the Bills are just going to let James Cook and his usage naturally unfold over the course of a football game? Or do you think even as early as week 1, you're going to see some things packaged and see some things schemed up to get the ball into the hands of James Cook and make him a part of the game plan? What are your thoughts? Is that a little gamesmanship from Ken Dorsey there? Or do you think he's serious?
I mean, it sounds like that is like someone explained to me what it means for something to naturally unfold during the course of a football game. Like
the way I read it was he's running back number 2 when it's his time. If he pops, he pops, but we're not going to do anything special to get him on the field. That's how I read it. That's how I interpreted it.
I think he's being a little coy. I mean, Ken Dorsey is a smart dude. Like he's an intense guy. He knows what he's doing. We've gotten to know him a lot better during this offseason and during training camp. Like he's going, if maybe it's a situation where it's like, okay, well, maybe if like he comes in on the 2-minute drill and makes a couple nice catches and generates some yak or something, then maybe he gets like an extra series or 2 in the second half or something like that. So maybe that's what he means, right? But like, you are not going to intentionally keep James Cook off the field just because you want to sort of stick to your comments, right? Like he's going to get on the field, and if he makes plays, then you're going to keep him on the field. And to Jason's point here, Cook should be schemed. Quick passes might be like that's sort of like against the comment, right? Like if you're trying to scheme up something for James Cook, like that's not quote naturally putting him in. That's why I kind of questioned the comment to begin with, right? It's like you are naturally going to scheme up something for him. I think is what you mean.
I can't picture a scenario even as early as week 1 where the Buffalo Bills are just using James Cook like they used Matt Breida when Matt Breida was active. All right, you're the number 2 running back. Make the most out of it when you're there. They chased J.D. McKissick before they went out of their way to draft James Cook in the 2nd round after drafting 2 third-round running backs the previous 2 years.
And signed Duke Johnson before the draft.
Johnson before the draft. So it shows that they want this type of running back in their offense. I think there will be some stuff schemed up for him over the course of this football game. Maybe it won't be something you see on the first couple of drives, and maybe that's what he was being coy about. But I think James Cook is going to get himself 5-6 touches in this football game. I think he'll be pushing 8 or 9 when you count the running game as well. I think they're going to try to get him the ball into his hands somewhere between 5 and 8 times a game at minimum to start, and I think that'll naturally grow. So I think I agree with you there. I think Ken Dorsey was being a little coy there. So let's get into it now. We have a number of things in the comment section. I want you guys to heat up for this one. We're going to do a little bit of Buffalo Bills 2022 regular season over-under. So I'm going to run you through a couple of statistical things. And Dave, I want your take over-under on sort of these statistical takes. In the comment section, I want your thoughts on these statistical takes as well. Let's start where we always start with QB1, Josh Allen. We've had this conversation before. I want to have it again, see if any minds have changed over the course of the preseason. Over under 45 touchdowns for Josh Allen in the regular season 2022. Not passing touchdowns, but total touchdowns combined. Over under 45 touchdowns for Josh Allen. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, so I went back and looked. I think he had 46 in 2020, 37 passing, 8 rushing, 1 receiving. And that 8 rushing was quite a bit. 37 passing obviously was higher even than last year's 36 passing and 6 rushing, so 42 total last year. 45 is a big number. Look, when I say under here, it's not because I'm trying to disrespect anybody. I'm just saying I'm coming in. I'm thinking he's going to be right at like 43, 44 total touchdowns. I think 37 passing, 7 rushing seems about right for me. I actually increased his rushing TDs from a year ago by 1. He only had 6 a year ago, and increased his passing TDs by 1 from a year ago, and that gets him to 44. He threw the ball 646 times last year, so all it takes is like 1 or 2 of those to be touchdowns difference, and like you have this over. But I'm gonna say under, because I think anywhere over 40 total touchdowns is incredible, even in this 17 game season. And I'm not quite ready to go there yet. But part of it is I feel like you're probably going to go over on this one. I wanted to give my take for going under, but look, 44 touchdowns is kind of where I'm predicting right now. Is not anything to scoff at.
Yeah. So Rantilly comes in the great comment too, sort of back you up. If we see the reemergence in the run game, right, we see that Cromer effect. I'm not saying the Bills are going to be some rushing football team and Devin Singletary is going to be Derrick Henry or anything like that. But where you could see the reemergence of the running game is on the goal line in the red zone, right? So if you get a reemergence of the running game and our offensive line starts getting a push at the 2 to 3 yard line, you don't have to subject Josh Allen to so many hits. You don't have to risk him passing the football when you're so tight up on the goal line like that. So there's really an opportunity for Josh Allen to have a lot of his touchdowns vultured, or a decent chunk of touchdowns vultured, if the run game can sort of get its act together under Aaron Cromer, because they could be stronger in the red zone. So I'm definitely buying that, but I'm taking the over here. And it's simply for this reason. You divide, you take 45 and you divide it by 17, you get 2.6. So essentially Josh Allen needs to get 3 touchdowns a game, passing, rushing, receiving, whatever. He's got to get 3 touchdowns a game to reach that 45 touchdown milestone. I don't think there's ever going to be a pregame show that we do where we say to ourselves, our expectation is for Josh Allen to get 2 touchdowns today. I just don't think that we're ever going to have that conversation. The offense is funneled through Josh Allen. He is the Bills are the most QB-centric team in the league in terms of putting the ball in Josh Allen's hands. So I think for everything to run smoothly, for the Bills to do what they want to do this season and not just make the playoffs and win the AFC East, but get that 1 seed and get that bye week, I think you got to be even more Josh Allen-centric and take the pressure off other places. And even if you take the pressure off other places, he's still got to produce because some of that pressure is taken off. So I need him to get me 45 plus touchdowns this year. So I'm going to smash the over, because I think the Buffalo Bills do achieve those goals this year. So, Stephen Burns comes in and says Josh hit 201 times last year, most in the league. Definitely got to bring that down. Bills Mafia STF says, I think Josh breaks 40 passing touchdowns this year, but fewer rushing touchdowns. So I go slightly under at 44. I'm honestly shocked at the number of people who have said under. So it'll be really, really interesting. Steven says Baltimore is the most QB-centric team in the league. Yeah, I guess you could say that too, because their offense is literally dependent on one of their quarterback skill sets, and that skill set being his ability to run the football. Not that Lamar is a bad passing quarterback. I like Lamar, but their offense is definitely based. So you can make an argument that the Bills are number 2 there. All right, on to the next, Devin Singletary. Now this is a pretty popular one, and there's an easy, this one's difficult, but I've seen a lot of different people going over and under on this one over the course of the summer on social media. Devin Singletary, 1,000 yards. He had 870 yards in 2021. Can he go over the 1,000 yard mark in 17 games in 2022? Over under 1,000 yards for Devin Singletary.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the comment section, we're talking rushing yards only here. So,
Yes.
so here's the thing: career 4.7 yards per carry. Right?
Mhm.
You mentioned the 870 last year. That was on 188 attempts. Okay,
Yep.
so if he were to clear 1,000 rushing yards in 17 games, he'd have to set a new career high in rushing attempts. He'd have to be at 213 attempts if he
Mhm.
hit his 4.7 career yards per carry. I know the offensive line should be better at run blocking this year. That's the Aaron Kromer effect. And I know he came on at the end of last year. But having said that, at the end of last year, he was really the only guy in the mix. And
Mhm.
while I don't think it's necessarily fair, it's not necessarily fair to say under because of Devin Singletary. I just think it's under because of the nature of the Bills' offense and the nature of the fact that it does feel like James Cook is going to have a role, not just passing, but running as well.
Mhm.
And Zach Moss, at least early in the season, looks like he will have some kind of role running the ball as well. Now, it will be determined whether or not Zach Moss ends up becoming, a healthy scratch, down the road or even as early as week 1. We will see. But
Mhm.
based on sort of how it looked so far through the preseason and through, drafting James Cook and knowing the Bills are really at kind of a pass first team to begin with, um, I don't know that Devin Singletary is going to get 200 plus carries this season. 188 last year, where he was really the only
Mhm.
guy in the last 6-7 games, was still a career high for him, about 30 more than his previous career high. So I'm going to say under on this, not because I don't think he's not talented enough to get 1,000. I just don't know that the volume of attempts are going to be there for him to do it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I'll explain sort of my take in a second. But some really good comments coming in. Pops Mafia says Singletary looked good at the end of last year with Saffold added. I think he gets to 1,000 yards. Carl T coming in saying this is the best O line that Devin has ever been running behind, 1,000 yards easily. Stephen Burns comes in and says I would say over on Singletary, but I'm hesitant because of Cook. I think he's more than just a pass catching back. Darth K coming in saying expecting 1,000 yards at running back while splitting carries between 3 running backs is unrealistic. And Caden comes in and says 3 running backs going to share the ball. I don't think any of them will get to 1,000 yards, but I think as a team they could get to around 2,500. So some really good points made there. And I'm with you, Dave, and I'm with some of the people in the comment section on the under. And it's not about Devin Singletary's talent level. If the like over the course of the first 4 or 5 games, if what happens on the field, if what is produced on the field is that Zach Moss is still the same old Zach Moss and that James Cook just isn't ready, Devin Singletary becomes the bell cow back on this football team. The Buffalo Bills ride him and he could push 1,500 yards. But I just don't expect that to happen. I think Zach Moss will be better. I think that James Cook will have a role and he will excel in that role. And I think splitting between those 3 guys will just make it super difficult. He had 870 yards in 2021. You mentioned the carry total. I think it was 188, something like that.
At 188, yep.
That's 11 carries per game. I don't expect him to get more than 11 carries per game. So he'd have to significantly increase his yards per carry. And I just don't, even with the better offensive line, I just don't think he can do it enough to make up 130 yards there.
He would need about 30 more carries based on his yards per carry career average, right?
Yeah.
He needs to go from 188 to 213. So 188, 98, 208. He needs about 25 more carries than he did last year, which if you think about it over 17 games, it's only about, less than 2 per
Yeah.
game, right? But, 13, 14 carries a game for a guy that really he didn't even hit double digit carries consistently until the late stages of the season. That's where, again, I kind of worry a little bit about him. I just worry a little bit about that.
Randy with a great comment here, and this sort of echoes what I've been saying on the show and what I feel. Running back by committee, where Motor's the primary back, especially on first and second downs. Moss is the red zone vulture. I'm still buying that until I see him inactive on Thursday night. I'm still buying Moss as the red zone vulture. and Cook is the third down, chains of pace back. So I think that's a perfect summation right there of what the Buffalo Bills running back room looks like. And Pamarto comes in and says 1,000 scrimmage yards, 100%. I think Devin Singletary can get 1,000 yards from scrimmage when you're factoring in the passing game as well.
Yeah,
Even though he won't be the dominant pass catcher, I think there's enough meat on the bone there for him to make up the yardage to get to 1,000 total between passing and receiving. Darth Kosh coming in with a great comment. Which running back would have the highest average? If I had to guess, I would say James Cook, because I think he'll be schemed to be out there on passing down. So they'll be giving like a lot of draw plays to him and things like that. Devin Singletary is going to get the most carries, so that's going to bring his yards per carry down. I think Moss getting a little red zone stuff, so that'll bring his yards per carry down. So my money would be on James Cook to have the highest yards per carry. What do you think?
That's a good one. I'll give Devin the edge in yards per carry. I mean, career 4.7 in the NFL is nothing. I mean, that's impressive with like not the best blocking offensive lines. And I think Devin Singletary, he's going to be a good yards after contact back this year. I think, I think just with his balance and his footwork and his low center of gravity, he's going to churn out those extra couple yards per contact. And not to say James Cook can't, but I'll give the edge to Devin on that one just to be a little bit different.
All right. Speaking of running back, we're going to transition now to James Cook, and not the running game, but James Cook's use in the passing game. So my next over-under here is James Cook, 50 targets in the 2022 regular season. So what do you think? Over-under 50 targets in the passing game for James Cook.
Yep. So I went back to our offensive preview show we did back in May, and I wanted to stay consistent because we went through our, quote, wide receiver target projections, which we included target projections for the backs as well in that. And so in 2022, I had projected about 615 to 620 targets between the receivers and running backs, and I had Cook with 40 on that list. And that was interesting because in that list, I had guys like Shakir getting 30. I had Davis getting 100, which we'll talk about here in a minute. McKenzie getting 40. But now that I'm seeing that, I think McKenzie is going to be higher and Crowder is going to be lower. Doesn't matter for the purpose of this argument. Cook's, I think, still getting around 40 targets this year. 50 is a big number for running back. Now, Devin Singletary had 50 targets last year as a running back, one for the Bills. Moss had 32. So 82 targets plus another 9 for Matt Breida. Almost 100 targets to the running backs last year from Josh Allen. And I don't really expect Moss to be involved much in the passing game this year. So, I'm going to say Cook can get at least to what Moss was last year, 32, and probably push over 40, but 50 is a high number for me. So I'm going to say under, but just barely.
Yeah, Jay Zan coming in saying that's just under 3 targets a game. So I would say over, and I'm sort of in agreement with Jay Zan 7117 here. I took the over. And the reason why I took the over is you mentioned that Devin Singletary had 50 last year, 100 between all the running backs. The Buffalo Bills need to do a better job this season of taking pressure off of Josh Allen. Some of it is scheming guys open and doing that yards after the catch stuff, generating a screen game, running the football better, and just letting Josh Allen dump the ball into the hands of guys who can make plays. They went after J.D. McKissick, so it shows that this was sort of a priority of the Buffalo Bills right off the bat to start this offseason. They didn't get him. They went and signed Duke Johnson as a fallback and then used a second-round pick on James Cook. To me, that screams that one of the things the Buffalo Bills want to attempt to do to take some of the pressure off of Josh Allen is not just to run the ball better, but to get the ball into the hands of running backs like a James Cook who can make yards after the catch, who can make plays with the ball in their hands. It's 2.9 catches per game, so 3 catches per game. I expect the Buffalo Bills to target James Cook in the passing game 3 to 5 times every game. And then the extras will be what he does in the passing game. But I can't envision a world where James Cook doesn't get at least like 3 targets in the passing game a game. Again, once it all sort of unfolds on the football field, maybe that changes. But it's hard for me to picture the Bills with his skill set not targeting this dude at least 2-3 times a game, and then sometimes more, depending on the game plan and just depending on how hot he gets. So I think he can easily get to that 3 target per game march. We're not talking about receptions; we're talking about targets. So I think he can probably easily get to that 50 target range. So I'm gonna smash the over there. All right. So That brings us to the next one, Gabriel Davis. Again, this is one where might have been good to go back and look at that show that we did, because we asked the same exact question a couple of months ago on our sort of the offensive prediction show. See if anything changes here. 100 targets for Gabriel Davis. So bringing Gabriel Davis into account here. 100 targets for Gabriel Davis, over or under?
Yep. So obviously we covered, like, we this has been a very big topic of conversation all summer, right? He only had 63 targets last year, but leaving behind 112 targets from Cole Beasley, leaving behind 72 targets from Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, that's 200, just around 200 targets right there being left behind. Now, I know some of that is going to go to the likes of Khalil Shakir. Some of that may be redistributed to the backs, like you mentioned, to James Cook, but it's hard to envision for me Gabriel Davis as a full-time player, as a full-time number 2, even though he's not a slot guy, and like the slot guy Beasley drew a lot of volume. It's hard for me to envision, with all the hype surrounding Gabriel Davis and the new video that just came out and just the work he's been putting in, and this, he is the number 2 here. I just don't see myself betting against this guy in any way. And so I'm going to say over. I think it's going to be close. I'm not going to say over with a ton of confidence, because 100 targets is a lot of targets, but I'm going to say over. I do think he can do it. I think, like, you think about Emmanuel Sanders getting 72 targets last year, and did it really feel like that many? It didn't to me. So to me, with the targets being left behind and him ready to step up and be one of those household names, I think coming into the season, I'm going to say over for this one.
We got Randy Arncuddy. Randy's not usually this generous with some of his takes. So I'm gonna read this one from Randy here. He says Davis 100 plus targets, 68 catches, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. So Randy's all in on Gabe Davis. I love it. Richard comes in and says under, but he gets 100. He gets 1,100 yards. And this is where I'm torn on Gabriel Davis. I chose the over here as well, and the same reasoning as you.
Again, it's targets, not catches.
Yeah, 63 targets last year. You're subtracting 184 targets between Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley. I think at least 47 of them can make their way to Gabriel Davis on top of what he did last year, right? So I think he gets at 100 target mark. But if he doesn't, even if he doesn't, I think the production is going to be phenomenal. So he's either going to have the ball thrown to him a ton, and he's going to produce with those 100 plus, or he could be targeted 80 times. But I think if he's only targeted 80 times, he has an insane production with those 80 targets, because we saw what happened in the playoffs. When you focus solely on Stephon Diggs and you leave a guy like Gabe Davis on his own, to his own devices in 1v1s, he will burn you. So it'll be interesting to see how defenses scheme against the Buffalo Bills. You're going to see it with the Rams in week 1. Do they give Jalen Ramsey help, or do they leave Jalen Ramsey on an island? If they leave Jalen Ramsey on an island, now it's Gabe Davis's turn to, can he put up with other people looking his way, not just being ISO'd? Or maybe that alleviates some pressure for Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs can go off. It brings that Gabe Davis production down. But other weeks, when the defenses adjust, Gabe Davis's production goes up. So it'll be really interesting to see how this 1A, 1B dynamic works. But I'm going with the over here for Gabriel Davis. I think by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about these two guys, Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, like, people talk about Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I think they're going to be that kind of prolific duo. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing that play out this season. Caden coming in with a big one. He says, I'm a big Davis believer this year. Lots of opportunities opened up. He has taken a major step. Oh, that was Randy Hartman. I apologize. And then Caden comes in and says, Gabe going to have at least 15 targets on Thursday. That's a hot take right there. I like that. And Carl coming in saying, if Diggs is getting the best cornerback, then Gabe Davis will be the focal point for Josh, unless he goes underneath to McKenzie or Crowder. I say the over for Davis. And that's the interesting part, right? If Gabriel Davis can keep up this production that he had in the playoffs when he was ISO'd, it's going to take attention away from Stephon Diggs. And even if Gabriel Davis doesn't meet the expectations that all these fans have for him, I think it'll pump up Stephon Diggs' numbers extraordinarily, higher than they already have been the last couple of years. Because no offense to Emmanuel Sanders and no offense to Cole Beasley working out of the slot, I do think teams were able to sort of, focus on Stephon Diggs at times. And there might not be an opportunity to do so this year. So it'll be really interesting to see if maybe even Stephon Diggs, despite all he's accomplished in his career, can push for some career highs with some of the pressure taken off of him. With Randy coming in saying this offense is set up very much to be a pick your poison type of scheme. So week to week, right? Like 1 week it's going to be Gabriel Davis going off. The next week it's going to be Stephon Diggs popping off. The next week it's going to be Isaiah McKenzie or Dawson Knox. It's very much a pick your poison type of deal, and it's going to make it really difficult. And a lot of the production might be based on how the defenses decide to scheme for the Buffalo Bills. But kudos to the Buffalo Bills to making themselves that varied that they can have success, even when certain guys are focused on. And that brings us to Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox spoke to the media today for the first time since the passing of his brother Luke, thanked the people of Buffalo, talked about how he wants to be here long-term, said that he thinks Luke's definitely going to be watching on Thursday night from up above. So could Dawson Knox, he's my early candidate for Take Me Higher Player of the Game, because he's got a lot to play for on Thursday. Dawson Knox over under 10 touchdowns on the season. Where would you go with that? And Pops Mafia coming in and saying, I would love to see Knox get a big game on Thursday in memory of his brother. That would be a great one. Over under 10 touchdowns.
I mean, so he had 71 targets last year, right? And I think that number is going to go up a little bit. I think he could be in the 80 to 85 target range, but only 49 catches last year. And he had 9 touchdowns on only 49 catches last year, which is like an insane, right? He's basically like 1 out of every 5 of his catches was a touchdown, basically. And 10's a big number. It's a big number. I think the easy answer to this is under. I think if he repeats last year's touchdown number 9, that's still a huge season for Dawson Knox from a scoring standpoint. I think anywhere in the 6 to 8, 7 to 9 touchdown range for him is an incredible year. I can't predict 10 touchdowns for him. 9 on only 49 catches last year was ridiculous. And I do think with guys like Shakir and Cook and maybe even Diggs getting bumped up a little bit this year too, with the likes of Davis kind of helping, like you just mentioned. I'm just going to say under, just because I just think it's a smarter answer.
Yeah, a lot of good comments coming in. Pops Mafia says over 10 for Knox. Randy Hartman says, I want touchdowns from Knox. I don't care so much about catches and targets. I'm with you there. For me, that's Dawson Knox's bread and butter, is what he brings his team as a blocker to hopefully establish this running game and in the red zone. Stephen Burns says, touchdowns have such variance. I'd have to go under, but even if he has 8 or 9, that's crazy good. Richard Rush says over. He will have Knox at 12. Carl T coming in saying Josh will have 100 friends and family in the stands from Fireball. Going for the over. Maybe he'll get 11 in this game.
Fireball will be shut down because there will be no one there.
Dude, who was telling this story? Someone was telling this story. I'm blanking on who told. I can't remember if it was a local guy. Oh, it was Brett Coleman on the on Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn's show. Said he was traveling and he was driving down the interstate in California, and there was a Fireball sign, like an exit to Fireball sign. And Brett Coleman was like, dude, Fireball is like 100 miles off this exit in the middle of nowhere. That sign wasn't there 5 years ago. That's Josh Allen put Fireball on the map, literally, that exit sign is there when you're driving down the highway in California. So that was a really great story from Brett there when he was talking with Greg and Aaron. If you haven't had a chance to check his appearance on their show, check it out. But yeah, I'm going to go with the under as well. And part of my reasoning is the run game improvement. Like I still think, and again, this could all change on Thursday if Zach Moss is inactive, right? But I'm still going with that Zach Moss touchdown vulture this year. I think the running game will be better, and I think that will help in the red zone, and we can lean a little bit more on the running game in the red zone. So I think that will take some of the touchdowns. I think they'll take some of the touchdowns away from a guy like Dawson Knox. I still think he has a solid season. I still think he puts up 700-800 yards receiving. I still think he, catches somewhere between 5 and 8 touchdown passes. I think it'll be a great year for Dawson Knox. I think he'll get paid this offseason. I think he'll be a Buffalo Bill long term, and I think he's a cornerstone to this franchise. But I'd be pleasantly surprised if he went over that 10 mark on offense this year. Stephen Burns comes in and says that Brett Coleman cover one episode with Greg and Aaron was really good. If you haven't seen it, yeah. So again, check it out if you haven't had a chance. All right, on to the defense now. And I don't know if I'm lazy or uninspired or what, but only have one for the defense. Only have one over under for the defense. And that is Von Miller, of course. 10 sacks over or under for Von Miller. What do you got here?
Yeah, I'm going over. So he had 9.5 and 8 respectively the last 2 years, but was in double-digit sacks for every other year in his career leading up to that. The Bills have a really good D-line around him. Ideally, we'd like to think teams are going to be playing from behind quite a bit against the Bills, which should give him plenty of pass rushing opportunities. He has played with some good defensive lines. Obviously, he played with Aaron Donald last year, and he played with some good players like Derek Wolfe and others in Denver on the interior. So he's played on some good defensive lines, but Vaughn is going to go over 10 with this defensive line he's playing with this year, especially given game situations. I think the Bills should be leading in a lot of games, and he should have opportunities in games to be closing them out and to be getting to the quarterback. And I also think there's going to be a little bit of a Vaughn has proven everything he needs to prove in this league, right? He's a Super Bowl champion 2 times over. He's got the sack numbers, but I do think that there's still going to be a little bit of, I want to prove to people that I am still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and I got paid the way I did because I am one of the best still. So he's going to go over.
I know when voting occurred. It occurred in obviously like October, November. So playoffs were not a part of the vote total. But we talked about how after that playoff, how can you rank Josh Allen at 13 on the NFL 100? Von Miller had a sack a game in the playoffs last year and came in at 93. So I know when voting occurs, and I know Vaughn knows when voting occurs, but I think there's a little chip for Von Miller to come out and play his best football early on. You mentioned 8 and 9.5 sacks the last couple of years. Sack a game in the playoffs. I think he picks up right where he left off. I mean, he's going to be rotating. The Buffalo Bills always utilize that rotation. It will keep him fresh. The Buffalo Bills have a solid secondary, so he'll have a chance for some more cleanup sacks, things of that nature. And I think the Buffalo Bills have a really talented interior defensive line. When you sort of put all of that stuff into a formula, I think that makes it easy to predict, or an easy, I shouldn't say easy, but a safe bet that Von Miller will get over that 10 mark. So I have him somewhere between 10 and 15 sacks this season in that rotation for the Buffalo Bills. I think that's a solid bet. So I'm smashing the over, just like AK Cash is smashing that over. Caden, now so confident, he says under. We have Jason Taylor who says under. Randy Hardman says, and I love this comment, in this division with Milkbag, Milf Hunter, and Tua, smash the over. Stephen Burns comes in and says, I have him at the over. I have him at 11 to 12, and reports out of camp are crazy. AK Cash says over under 15 sacks, including playoffs. There you go, Judge. So he's going to go over 15 once you count in the playoffs as well. Richard Rush comes in and says over, plus we are top 5 in sacks. I like the confidence there. Rantingly comes in and says Tua, Jones, and Wilson over. I think our division makes people feel a little more confident here. And then we got a super chat from Zaqua here. He comes in and says, well, James Cook forced his team to run the ball more with his ability. Need more balance so Josh doesn't have to run so much and take as many hits. What are your thoughts here, Dave, on this super chat here?
Well, I feel like we have this conversation like the last couple of years. We don't want Josh to take so many hits. We don't want him, but that's what makes him special, right? We have to live with that. I mean, he had 112 rushing attempts last year. The one thing I will say about Josh running the ball is like he doesn't slide really, but he also doesn't take bad hits like by and large, right? He's diving low, or he does hurdle every once in a while. Like I'm not worried now after a couple years of him. Honestly, the ones where I get like the most nervous are like those like sort of just like design sweep runs that they try to have him do on like short yardage. Like those are the ones that like I feel like he was the most prone to get hurt. And there was one play last year where he did take a shot on the knee, but where he's like improvising and he's running, or if it's like a really like a draw or something, like I'm not too worried about it, honestly. So maybe want to bring it down a little bit, preserve those legs, but you can't take the player out of him, right? Like you can't harness him too much, because that's what
Yeah.
makes him special.
And that's he mentions that's what makes him special, and he's just willing to do whatever it takes to help his team wins. But I'm in agreement that, any way you can take the pressure off him, the better. But I don't know if James Cook takes the pressure off him as a running back. I think James Cook takes the pressure off him as a receiver. I still go back to Brandon Beane did an appearance on the Pat McAfee show, even before I think free agency. And he's like, man, some of these running backs are crazy. They're practically slot receivers. And that comment really stood out to me. And I thought to myself when he was making that comment, there's one running back really in college football that's draft eligible that fits that comment to a T. And that player is James Cook. And then 2 months later, they draft James Cook after trying to get JD McKissick. So the Bills might not have wanted to use that capital on a running back, but they did because maybe plan A fell apart in JD McKissick. But it's clear that Brandon Beane wanted that type. And so I think a lot of the pressure that James Cook is going to take off of Josh Allen is going to be in the passing game. I still think he'll be a good runner. I don't think you'll see James Cook getting a volume of carries for this football team until 2023, when he maybe becomes a bigger part of the offense, when one of those running backs, Moss or Singletary, comes out of the equation. So I don't think he's going to be a factor as much in the running game early as he will in the passing game. So on to, I actually got one more thing in the over-under here, and I'm just saying came in with a great comment on the Josh Allen thing. He told Chris Sims he was sore after the season because of his style of play. So maybe we do see a little bit of a change here.
Maybe.
And I do think James Cook is going to be a part of it. James Cook, Yak, running the ball better, all of these things the Buffalo Bills are going to try to implement to take that pressure off of Josh Allen. So we mentioned Von Miller over 10 sacks. That's the only real defensive topic I had, because we could really get into the weeds. Does Tremaine Edmonds get 100 tackles? Does a player get 5 interceptions? We could get into the weeds with that, but we got some other stuff to get to tonight. So the last question for the defense here, just so the defense doesn't feel left out. If there is any other player on this Buffalo Bills team that can push double-digit sacks this season, any other player, who is it?
I mean, look, my answer is Ed Oliver, and it's an odd answer probably to some, but to a lot of people, that's probably the where they would lean to. Like, I don't necessarily think that, like, I love Gregory Rousseau, right? I love him as a player. I love what he brings in defending the run. I don't know that he's like the pass rushing specialist or the pass rushing talent, maybe, that like he's going to be pushing double-digit sacks. I don't think AJ Epinesa or Boogie Basham are really in the mix to do that. And obviously Shaq Lawson, we know what he is. He's not in the mix to do that. So I know Jordan Phillips had his 9.5 sacks when he was here. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think Ed Oliver playing next to Daquan Jones and playing with Greg Rousseau and Von Miller on the edges, maybe Greg Rousseau and Von Miller forcing quarterbacks back up the middle, forcing that pressure to the quarterback having nowhere to go, but climbing the pocket creates opportunity for Ed Oliver. And we know he was a game wrecker at multiple times last year. And by all accounts, he is primed for a big year. So I will say most likely to push double digit besides Vaughn is Ed Oliver, but I don't think there will be anybody in double digits besides Von Miller.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So I wrote down Ed Oliver 1 and Jordan Phillips 2. I think maybe someone on that interior can play off of what Von Miller is doing on the edge, and they can push for double-digit sacks. But who that player will be, who knows? It could be Ed. But if Ed's facing double teams, it could be a guy like Jordan Phillips or a guy like Tim Settle, who work their way into those sort of scrappy sacks that Jordan Phillips got. But a number of people mentioned Rousseau, and I think that's fair. I mean, I still remember the PFF podcast right after the draft. Chris Collinsworth, everyone's favorite analyst, who's going to be covering the game on Thursday, unfortunately, was talking about Gregory Rousseau on the PFF podcast post-draft when Gregory Rousseau was drafted. And he used the funniest adjective to describe Gregory Rousseau's sack totals in college. That year we had 15 sacks. He said he was just really slappy. And like what he was trying to say was like, he just always finds himself at the quarterback. No matter how he gets there, no matter how unrefined it is, Groot was always at the quarterback's ankles. when he was rushing the passer at Miami, which led to his 15 sack total. If you have Von Miller rushing off the edge, and you got Daquan Jones eating up guys, and you got Ed Oliver and Jordan Phillips and guys like that wreaking havoc from the interior, I don't think Gregory Rousseau is ever going to be a Von Miller type sack artist in this league, but he's certainly somebody who can reap the benefits of having all those talented pass rushing guys to the right of him on the defensive line when he lines up at left end on every play. And I think you could see Groot getting a lot of those cleanup sacks this year and possibly being like this version of Jordan Phillips was in 2020, but from the edge, where he just gets a lot of cleanup sacks. So I think a guy like Groot, who is immensely talented, especially as a run defender, and he's already sort of solidified himself in the league as a really good edge defender. I think you could see him clean up in the sack department if everything else goes right to the right of him on that defensive line this season. Pops Mafia comes in and says, "I wish the radio broadcast match the TV better, so I don't have to listen to Chris Collinsworth." So maybe having a Syracuse guy in the booth with him and Mike Tirico will bring him down. And I feel like Al Michaels just sort of encouraged and brought out the worst in Chris Collinsworth. So I think have a Mike Tirico. I think Mike Tirico will keep him in line. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, let's transition now to the NFL landscape in general. Before we do, highly encourage you, if you haven't already, smash that like button. Helps us out with the algorithm. So if you like what you see, smash that like button. Maybe not what you see, but what you hear. If you like what you hear, smash that like button. We'd really appreciate it. And I highly encourage anyone out there, if you haven't already, to sign up for the Cover One Pass. It's $57 a year, and you get a Cover One shirt and decal that comes with your subscription, and you get access to all of this great premium Cover One exclusive members only content, in-depth analysis, including scheme, play, and player breakdowns, scouting reports and analytics and analysis. Can't speak today. Access to unlimited devices, access to the Cover One community. Our Slack channel is awesome. We have some great conversations in there. Access to all Cover One contributors. A lot of the good written content that is behind sort of a paywall you get access to with this One Pass Club access and other behind the scenes content. So we have a lot in store this year here at Cover One. If you like what you're hearing, if you like what everyone here at Cover One contributes, highly encourage you to sign up and make your play for that Cover One Pass. Head on over to cover1.football to get that Cover One Pass. Randy coming in and says, can't afford Cover One and NFL Plus, though. I'll tell you what, NFL Plus, everyone's ripping on it. I'm not so much a coach's film guy like other people, like all 22 guy like other people are. I mostly just like to just sort of see what they have to say and the clips that they do all the work for me. But I haven't had any issues on my Roku with NFL Plus yet. Do you have NFL Plus yet?
No, I haven't had any issues. I do have it. I have not had any issues. But I mean, people always find something to complain about, right? So, I mean, I did have.
Other people have said they've had issues. So,
my
suggestion is buy Roku because apparently it works really well with the Roku, which is ironic.
Well, and
NFL Game Pass was awful with Roku.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation with Pops Mafia actually, and he was talking about how he was having issues with it. But I think
they're supposed
to. Yeah, and there were issues with if you previously had Game Pass and had like an auto renewal set up, like your auto renewal, if it was like it didn't like automatically convert you, right? It waited till your renewal kicked in for you to. So there was some weird things going on with that as well.
And Pops Mafia too says NFL Plus doesn't have all 22, does it? It should.
It does.
But I think they might be a little slower on it than they have been in years past. It might not even be up yet. I believe I saw like they were saying, which is crazy. I mean, the NFL is $1 billion company. They should have the best app in the world. Like it should be the mecca of apps, just like they are the mega of sports, right? So at the end of the day, it's completely BS when some NFL PR guy is like, yeah, it just takes time to sort of, create something, our focus isn't on the coach's tape, but like we'll get to it'll eventually be there. Question mark on the date, like things like that. So
yeah, it's
Randy says he didn't see any all 22 today. So apparently it's supposed to be there. It's advertised that it will be there, but I think that it's like the last thing that they're ingraining into the thing. So who knows when that gets put in, like week 14 or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, I haven't had any issues, but all I've done is watch live preseason games. I just log in, put the game on that I want to watch, and there's no buffering or anything like that. So I just haven't any issues with it, but I haven't played around with it too much. So anyone feel free to leave your comment on what your issues are with NFL Plus, and we'll get to those. But speaking of the NFL in general, I want to do a little bit of season preview. One of our favorite things to do here on this show is to sort of create some receipts where people can come back and they can rip on us if we're wrong. But we're going to go through the entire NFL landscape here, AFC through the NFC, and we're going to pick division winners for every single division, and we're going to pick our 3 wild cards, and then we're going to make a Super Bowl prediction as well. So please join us as we go division by division, picking who we think are going to win each division, picking our wild cards, and then making our Super Bowl predictions. So feel free to join us in the comment section. We'll throw some of those up there as we get through it as well. Obviously, this is the Buffalo Bills. This is the Buffalo Bills podcast. So we are going to start with the AFC East. Who do you have winning the AFC East in 2022?
I mean, the Bills are going to win it for their, what is this going to be now? Their fourth consecutive,
third season,
third consecutive. I do think that, I mean, is there a chance the Bills don't win the division? Of course, there's always a chance. But like, to me, this is one of the, hate to say easier, but it's one of the more sort of obvious choices to make, right? The Bills are going to win this division. The other 3 teams are just not in the same league as the Bills. And while the Bills may not go a perfect 6-0 in the division, I'd love for them to do that. They are still going to win the division. And so, yes, the Bills will win the division.
We got Caden coming in jokingly, I hope, saying the Jets. Mike Hartle coming in saying Bills. Randy says Bills. Obviously, Pos Mafia says they sweep it. It goes with the Bills. So I'll tell you what, my choice is also the Bills, obviously. But I think the way in which the New England Patriots sort of gave us a scare last year, right? I think we all remember the NESN or the NBC Sports post-game show after the Wind game, where guys like Michael Hawley and all of them, where Tom Curran were having their fun with the Buffalo Bills and puffing their chests. I think there will be a point. I think there will be a point this season where Miami Dolphins fans will get to do that. I think there will be a point mid-season or so where the Miami Dolphins might be ahead of the Buffalo Bills by a game or 2, and I think the Miami Dolphins fans will have a chance to peacock. But I think by the time it's all said and done, after Week 18 comes and goes, the Buffalo Bills will have won the AFC East. But Miami, man, I mean, you look at this outside of quarterback, which who knows what you're going to get from Tua or Teddy or Skylar Thompson, whoever ends up playing quarterback for that team throughout the majority of the season. Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, Myles Gaskin, that's a talented running back room. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Eric Izukama, Cedric Wilson, Mike Gesicki. Those are some really good pass catchers. They have Alec Ingold, Teron Armstead sort of added as run blockers. Connor Williams added. They got a decent offensive line left to right with Armstead, Eichenberg, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, Austin Jackson. It's not the greatest, and there's not a lot of depth there. But it's also a Mike McDaniel football team, and he's known for that. And then their defense is just obviously incredible. I mean, their defense is Christian Wilkins, Raekwon Davis, Emmanuel Agba, Zach Sealer, John Jenkins along that defensive line. They've added Melvin Ingram. They've added Trey Flowers. They got Jalen Phillips, who looked really good. Obviously, everyone knows they're really good in the secondary. Javon Holland is a stud. They got some good special teams players. Like, they're a good football team. They're going to be one of my wild card picks. But I just don't think that they're good enough at the quarterback position to usurp the Buffalo Bills and win the division. Pos Mafia comes in with that right there, hammering it home outside of quarterback. But I do think whoever they do have at quarterback this season will produce enough, and there's enough talent on that team at the skill positions and on defense to work themselves into a wild card. And I'll definitely have them as one of my wild card teams. All right. So looks like we got a pretty solid clean sweep from the Bills fans here in the comment section. So let's move on to maybe something a little more challenging. This one's interesting. The AFC North. You have the Cincinnati Bengals, last year's Super Bowl runner-up. You have the Baltimore Ravens, a team with a lot of talent that can't stay healthy. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who just named Mitch Trubisky their starting quarterback today, and they made a lot of moves this offseason. And you have the Cleveland Browns, whose starting quarterback is Jacoby Brissett, no matter how talented they are for the first 11 weeks of the season. So How do you have the AFC North playing out this season?
This is a tough one. 3 good teams, and obviously the quarterback situation in Cleveland kind of puts the Browns down a peg. So, that makes it a little bit easier because if they weren't, if Watson was there, this would have been a very, very difficult scenario. A lot of people are going to be, I think, down on the Ravens this year because they traded Hollywood Brown and there's some question marks around what that offense is going to be. Is J.K. Dobbins going to come back and be healthy? What is Rashad Bateman going to be as the number 1 wide receiver? But I really like the Ravens roster. I really like what they did in the draft. I like Lamar Jackson. I think that the Ravens, to me, with John Harbaugh at the helm, a model of consistency as a head coach in this league, I still trust him more than Zach Taylor. I don't necessarily trust him more than Mike Tomlin, but Mike Tomlin's got Mitch Trubisky starting as his quarterback, and for that reason, I can't put Pittsburgh at the top, even though I do think Pittsburgh has the best defense in the division. So for me, I'm picking the Ravens to win this division this year. I know there's question marks about the offense, but I just trust John Harbaugh, and I know that Lamar Jackson's capable of some pretty special things on the football field, whatever you think of him as a passer. They still have Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely looks like he's going to be a pretty good player for them as well. And Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay could be guys that do prove themselves this year. So I like the Ravens. Tough choice, but I'm picking the Ravens to win the division.
Yeah, a lot of people in the comment section coming in saying the Bengals. Randy Hardman mentioned the Steelers. A lot of people have sort of the Ravens as a wild card. Vinny T, the Ravens is a wild card. Vinny T comes in and says, can't even doubt Tomlin, but same goes for Harbaugh if his team isn't decimated by injuries. So obviously you can't predict what goes on in an NFL season. I wanted to pick the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I was watching that Lions game, and it has something to do with the performance on the field, but one of the announcers made what I thought was a great comment. They said, Mitch Trubisky is going to start the year at quarterback because if Kenny Pickett starts the year at quarterback and struggles, it's harder to pull a first round pick off the field and then put him back on the field later. It sort of erodes the confidence, both, in the quarterback and on the team and in the fan base, et cetera. So it appears that the Steelers made the safe move with Mitch Trubisky, but I think that also caps their ceiling. And at some point, they're going to want Kenny Pickett to come in and play quarterback for them this season. You don't draft a guy his age to be a bench quarterback. Like, you just don't. Like, he's not some raw, toolsy guy that needs a year on the bench. He should be playing. So for that reason, I'm taking the Steelers completely off my list. I don't think they're going to compete this year. I think that they'll compete and they'll push to be a 500 football team, but I just don't think that they'll have enough to squeak into the playoffs with that uncertainty at the quarterback position. So I'm with you. I was tempted to go Bengals. I'm going Ravens. Really good, really aggressive defense. They might start off the year slow because of some injuries, but once J.K. Dobbins gets back and get rolling, once Lamar, who missed a lot of offseason stuff, gets back and gets comfortable and gets rolling, I think it's the Baltimore Ravens that pull away late and win this division. So I'm going with the Ravens as well, but you'll hear the name Bengals again from me when we get to the wild card. All right. AFC South. This one was the most difficult for me, to be honest. I went back and forth between two teams. Who did you ultimately go here in the AFC South?
This was the hardest one for me as well. I changed my opinion on this probably 3 or 4 times before finally settling on the Indianapolis Colts to win the AFC South. I do like the Titans. Harold Landry getting hurt is a big blow to that Titans defense. I know they still have a lot of other good players. And people will kind of go back to, okay, the Colts made the playoffs with Phillip Rivers sort of in the twilight of his career. Last year didn't really work out so much with Carson Wentz. Matt Ryan, I mean, this is it for him, right? He's at the twilight of his career. I would not expect Matt Ryan really to play beyond 2022. It would be a little bit of a surprise to me. But Matt Ryan is a very accurate quarterback, and he's a guy that's willing to sit in there and take shots. A more accurate quarterback than Carson Wentz by every pretty much statistical measure. And a good fit, I think, for a guy like Matt Ryan, have players like Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, Mo Alley Cox, and that running game that he's going to have behind him is going to be the best that he's ever had in his career. Atlanta, when he was there, they were never really known as a great running team. There were a couple seasons there where they had Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman duo, which was pretty good. But I like the Colts. I believe in Frank Reich. I think the Colts, and both of these teams, by the way, Colts and Titans, have very difficult schedules. So it is going to be tough for both to make the playoffs. Little hint, hint. But I'm going to give the edge here to the Colts. Just think they have that little bit of extra this year over the Titans, and I'll give the Colts the division this year.
Yeah, some good comments coming in here. Randy Hardman says the Colts. Stephen Byrne says the Colts because he doesn't trust Ryan Tannehill. Randy also thinks Houston comes in second, so that'd be a nice little shock there. Caden says he doesn't know the Titans is a wild card. They're a really scrappy football team. Colts, if the owner shuts his mouth, says Spots Mafia. Nick G says, you bet we see Malik Willis by week 7. Really good comment from Jessica Tennis here. She says Titans have a first place schedule, so the edge to Indy. Carl T says Colts have an awesome team. They just could not find their QB. Matt Ryan puts them atop this division. Vinny T says losing AJ Brown is going to hurt the Titans. Matt Ryan staying this over Wentz pushes it to the Colts for me. And then Mike H coming in saying Jaguars. Remember, you heard it here first. Lawrence takes a big jump at QB. Ryan and Tannehill regress.
I like that.
The Jaguars are a popular pick to at least hit the over. I think their over is 7.5 games, so they're a popular pick to at least hit the over there. AFC's so tough, man. They have to win the division to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to sneak in as a wild card, but I went with the Colts as well, and it was the Harold Landry injury that I was going to go Titans. I was going to go Titans, and I was going to put the Colts in as a wild card. I really do think that Harold Landry injury is huge. I think he's a big part of what they do on defense. I think that all these new receivers, I like the receivers, but I don't like them in combination with each other. Like Robert Woods, Treylon Burks, and Kyle Phillips. I like all three of those guys. I just don't like them in a room together. They don't mesh well, right? A receiving room is a puzzle piece. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they make those pieces fit, especially with a guy like Ryan Tannehill. They got Chigan Gankwu to play tight end, sort of bring back that type of player they had in why am I blanking on that tight end? Walker. Delaney Walker. There we go. To have that Delaney Walker vibe, I think he's a rookie that's going to surprise some people. But at the end of the day, I think Malik Willis is starting the second half of the season for the Tennessee Titans, and they are more in a build for 2023 mold than they are fighting for a playoff spot mold. So I'm going to give the edge to the Colts here as well. That leads us to the AFC West, and this is the division that everyone's got their focus on this year. Russell Wilson, Denver Broncos. Los Angeles Chargers adding Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson to go along with Justin Herbert. Kansas City losing Tyreek Hill, rebuilding that defense with some youth, adding Juju Smith-Schuster and Sky Moore and Marquez Valdez-Scantling to go along with Patrick Mahomes. And then the Las Vegas Raiders adding Devontae Adams, adding Chandler Jones, bringing in Josh McDaniels to try to reinvent himself outside of Bill Belichick's shadow. So where are you going? Because there's just storylines galore. There's competition galore. It's the best 4 quarterbacks, like the best quarterback talent of any of the divisions 1 through 4.
Top to bottom.
Where are you going? Yeah. Where are you going with this?
Well, you're going to see when we talk about this division, but for me, as far as the top of the division, I have to still go with the Chiefs. I know they lost Tyreek Hill, but they still have Travis Kelce. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a really good fit with them, complement Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is going to bounce back and have a better season this season. They still have a good offensive line. They added some pieces on defense that you and I both like. Obviously, they went out and they drafted the corner that we and Pro Ant all were kind of in on from Washington. So, look, it's the Chiefs for me until someone knocks them off. I think the Broncos and Chargers have both really, really good rosters, top to bottom. And it comes down to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. That combination is a deadly combination, right? We don't know yet what Nate Hackett is going to be like with Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but what's that mesh going to be like between the two of them? Riley and Herbert, obviously, they were close last year and just didn't quite get it, but we'll see in the wild card predictions as I make. And I just think the Raiders are in a tough spot because they have some really nice players. They went out and got Devontae Adams. They have Max Crosby, and I just don't like Josh McDaniels as a head coach. He has failed in previous stops. Doesn't mean he will fail here, but it's an uphill battle, I think, for the Las Vegas Raiders. So for me, Chiefs until someone can prove otherwise.
We got a bunch of comments here. Randy Harmon says Kansas City. King says the Chargers. Pops Mafia says the Chargers. Randy thinks the Broncos finish fourth. I'm in agreement with him. I had the Broncos finishing last in that division and not making the playoffs. Mike H says Chargers, big upgrade on defense. I like this comment from Jessica. She says KC until someone proves they are better. A lot of people thinking the Broncos are going to be overrated. Maston Park coming in saying Raiders should be nice, especially on offense. I agree with that. I really wanted to fit the Raiders into my playoff picture. I ended up not keeping them as one of my 7 teams. Well, spoiler alert from what I'm about to say here, but I really wanted to put them on. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't find a spot. The AFC is just so loaded. Pops Mafia says Chargers. I hope the team all split up so the Bills can get the 1 seed. That's the goal, right? Is they all beat up on each other. Vinny T says, I like the Chargers, but until proven otherwise, it's the Chiefs. So a lot of really good comments coming in here about the AFC West and how it plays out. I went with the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that Justin Herbert continues to just be a phenomenal quarterback, and he grows. And you got guys like Austin Eckler there. They've added Sony Michel and Isaiah Spiller. Spiller's hurt right now, but when he comes back, I think he'll fill into that Sony Michel role. They got some really good weapons on the offensive side of the football that Justin Herbert can throw the ball to. They added Zion Johnson to that offensive line, and then obviously defensively adding Khalil Mack. They added Anthony Johnson on the interior. I think they checked all the boxes. J.C. Jackson. There's just so many talented football players on that team. So I'm going with the LA Chargers, but I think that their stint in the postseason will be a short one. So I think that they'll look really good in the regular season. I think they'll crumble in the postseason. So the Chiefs, even though they're not coming out of my mouth right now, will be in a moment when we get to our wild card teams. And I think it's teams like the Chiefs, et cetera, even if they don't have the better record in the regular season, that will prove their merit in the postseason. So that brings us now to the wild card. So a quick recap. Who are your 4 division winners?
4 division winners for me are Bills, Ravens, Colts, and Chiefs.
And who are your 3 wild card picks?
I went back and forth on this a lot. And a lot of this to me came down to coaching and experience. But my 3 wild card picks are the Chargers as one of them for the reasons you just mentioned. I did put the Broncos in as a wild card team. I think just because of the Russell Wilson effect. I wanted to put teams like the Raiders or even the Dolphins or even the Titans here in this spot. But the Broncos, to me, with Russell Wilson, I think they have weapons galore on offense. Javonte Williams is a rising star. They've got Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. I just feel like in that they have some really good players on defense as well. It's going to be a slugfest in that AFC West, but I think Russell Wilson does do something special there. And then I have the Bengals as my last wild card team. This was a tough one for me going back and forth between the Ravens and the Bengals for the division, but I just don't think with that firepower the Bengals have on offense with Joe Burrow leading the helm that you're going to be able to keep the Bengals out of the playoffs. So that for me means I have teams like the Titans and Dolphins missing the playoffs and the Raiders obviously as well. Tough call. My first out was the Titans. I was wrestling between Titans and Broncos as my last team. And then my second out was the Dolphins with the Raiders third. So I went with the Broncos, Bengals, and Chargers as my 3 wild card teams this year.
Yeah, Caden comes in and says Bills, Chargers, Bengals, Colts to be his division winners. Then he has Chiefs, Ravens, and Dolphins. Jessica Tennis has Titans, Bengals, and Broncos. Randy Hardman, Bengals, Raiders, Ravens. Carl T coming in with a hot take here. All 3 wildcard teams come out of the West.
I wrestled with that for a little bit. I wrestled with that for a little bit. Yeah.
But then just what Stephen Burns says here, it's hard to have all those wildcard teams come out of the same division just
Yeah,
the
it
way the
is.
math works and stuff like that. Chargers, Dolphins, and Bengals from Nick G. I was tough. My first team out was the Raiders, and it was a really difficult decision for me. Second was the Steelers, third was the Broncos, and the fourth was the Titans. So my wild card picks are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Miami Dolphins
Mhm.
as my three wild card football teams. I think the Chiefs take a little bit of a step back. I think it takes their defense some time to gel. I think it takes Mahomes a little bit of time to get comfortable with his receivers. They kick it up late in the season. And like I mentioned, I think they show up in the postseason and do what they normally do in the postseason, and they'll be a force to reckon with. I just don't think they'll be doing it from, a 2 or a 3 seed. I think they'll be doing it from the wild card spot. Bengals, it was tough. And I just think the Ravens are a really loaded football team. I trust their coach, John Harbaugh, more than I trust Zach Taylor. So I think the Bengals are another team. The three really good safeties that they have
Mhm.
in that secondary, they really improve. What was the two weakest parts of that football team, the secondary and the offensive line. They went out and they just loaded it up. Like they're loaded in the secondary now, and they are loaded at offensive line now. Like they went out and just they spent the money where they needed to spend the money. So again, the Bengals are going to be a team to mess with if they can stay healthy in the postseason. And then the Miami Dolphins, I think they just get in based off of their defense and skill position talent. And then
Mhm.
obviously they could probably win a game or two once they get there, but I think it'll be a tough path with what they have at quarterback to do anything more than
Mm.
that. So that's how I
So
have the AFC playing out. That's how you have the AFC playing out. Do you have
Well
a little comment
well,
on
no, I
the
mean,
AFC?
6 out of 7 playoff teams we match on. I think the only ones we
Mhm.
didn't match was, You had Dolphins, I had Broncos, but otherwise
Yeah.
on the for actual just the playoff teams, we match on 6 out of the 7.
All right. On to the NFC now. And why can't the Bills be in the NFC?
This was a lot easier for me. I mean, the wild card, there were some
Uh,
questions, but, like, this was a lot
Why
easier.
why ca like, there it's 3 teams and a bunch of, like, meh. Like, if you threw some of like, the Raiders would be one of the best teams in the NFC if you put them in the NFC.
Yeah.
And they're not on my playoff list for the AFC, so
Yep.
absolutely crazy. And it goes back and forth. The NFC was a lot better than the AFC forever, but it's just such a stark contrast looking at these 2 divisions. But let's start with the funniest division in the history of football, the NFC East. Like, big markets, big flash, not a lot of substance year after
Mhm.
year from the NFC East, which makes it kind of funny. So let's start with the NFC East. Who do you got taking the NFC East here?
Um, Maybe a surprise pick, but I'm gonna take the Philadelphia Eagles to win the NFC East. I like Jalen Hurts a lot. I think they're a scrappy team. I think they're a very good running football team. I think when Miles Sanders comes back and um, comes back to full health, they'll have a really nice group of running backs there between Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell, and Boston Scott. And I obviously the addition of AJ Brown is huge for them, and that pairing with by all reports a very um, solid and ready to kind of break out Devontae Smith to me looks like it's going to be a really nice pairing. And then obviously Dallas Goddard kind of stepping out of the shadow last year of Zach Ertz and kind of proving himself as a, TE1, if you will.
Mhm.
I just like the Eagles. I think that they are a more sound, more complete. They're a little bit less off the sort of the media radar than a team like the Cowboys, who always seem to kind of fail to live up to expectations. And I don't really like Mike McCarthy anyway
Mhm.
as a head coach. So I'm giving the edge to the Philadelphia Eagles this year in the NFC East. That's my pick.
Yeah, I mean, it should be really interesting. I have the Eagles as well. Looking through, I like Jalen Hurts as that dual threat. I think he helps them in the running game until Miles Sanders gets back in. I remember the Zach Moss rumors when cut down day came was that the Eagles might be interested because they're looking for a north south between the tackles runner, a guy to eat up some carries and do the tough work for them, especially because that's Miles Sanders
Mm,
when Miles Sanders is healthy. Because Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, not the kind of guys they are. They got Trey Sermon off the waiver wire when he got waived by the 49ers. So maybe Trey Sermon can find some life in Philadelphia. But AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goddard, the speed of Quez Watkins, the steadiness of a guy like Zach Pascal. A lot of talent there. They got a decent offensive line. They added guys like Kaiser White, N'Kobe Dean, Jordan Davis, uh, CJ Gardner Johnson just recently, James Bradbury to this defense. They got a good kicker in Jake Elliott. So
yep.
I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles as well. The Cowboys, I don't trust their depth. They're all flash, no substance. Their coach is a
Agreed.
joke. Mike McCarthy, he's an absolute joke. So I'm not going with the Cowboys. I think the Washington Commanders could make it interesting, but at the end of the day, Ron Rivera is what he is, and that team is gloriously mediocre in every aspect of what they do. And then there's the New York Giants, who are clearly in a rebuild. So I'm going to
Yes.
go with the Philadelphia Eagles out of the NFC East. Most people seem to be agreeing with that comment. Jessica Tennis says Eagles. Mike H says Eagles. Nick G says Giants. Spin says Eagles. Pops Mafia pointing out the Cowboys are already showing. They have that huge injury to Tyrone Smith. They had to sign Jordan. Had to sign why am I blanking? Jason Peters. There we go. I almost said Jordan Peters. Jason Peters. So he'll start the season on the practice squad, but he'll probably be their left tackle sooner rather than later. Carl T coming in saying Cowboys. Steve Lynn says Eagles are the betting favorite, not a surprise at all. Randy Harmon says Cowboys second, Giants third.
I purposely did not
last.
look at the odds because I wanted to just go with my feelings on this one.
Yeah, and Justin Towns comes in and says Ron Rivera's got 3 winning seasons as a head coach in all those years he's been coaching. So, yeah, it's crazy. Like he's a good dude and he's a solid leader of men and like just he's everything you want, but he just doesn't win. Like he's been riding the coattails of that one Super Bowl on Cam Newton for a very, very long time. All right, on to the NFC North. A lot of storylines here. The Bears don't look like they're going to be very competitive this year. But Matt Eberflus, I think, is a very good head coach. You have the Detroit Lions, the darlings of Hard Knocks. They have a pretty talented roster all around, but at the end of the day, Jared Goff is their quarterback, and I think their backup is now Nathan Sudfeld. So Jared Goff is one injury away from them having like an XFL quarterback playing quarterback for them.
David Blau, I thought.
No, they cut him. They waived him. And they signed Nate Sudfeld.
Oh.
Yeah. So the 2 guys competing for the backup quarterback spot both lost. And they signed Nate Sudfeld off of waivers. Then you have the Minnesota Vikings, who on paper have a lot of talent. And if Kevin O'Connell can catch lightning in a bottle and be the Nick Sirianni, can be a Nick Sirianni type for this football team, they could make a run and make things interesting. And there's obviously the betting favorites, the Green Bay Packers. They lost Devontae Adams, but they have a really good defense. They have Aaron Rodgers. Where are you going here with the NFC North?
I do like the Vikings roster. I think Kevin O'Connell, he was one of my favorite offseason hires of any of the of the last 2 seasons. Like if you go back to last season and this season, I really like Kevin O'Connell, but it's still Aaron Rodgers' division. And again, kind of like the Chiefs situation, but to a lesser extent because the teams aren't quite as good behind the Packers as the Packers still are, even without Devontae Adams. They have Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon as that tandem. They still have a very good defense, like you said. They have some receivers, right? Like they drafted Romeo Doubs, my guy. They got guys like Alan Lazard that can do something with the football, and they drafted Christian Watson, and we'll see what kind of comes out of that. But like, it's still Aaron Rodgers, and they still have a great tandem running the ball and a good defense. So I'm still picking the Packers, but we'll see as we get to my wildcard picks that I do have faith in the Vikings to be a good team this year. But for me, it's still the Green Bay Packers winning that division this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. So I'm going to pull up Green Bay's depth chart here real quick. But first of all, I drafted Romeo Doubs way probably earlier than I should have in a fantasy league last night. I think he's going to end up as their wide receiver 1 by the end of the season. I have a lot of faith in a guy like Romeo Doubs to blow up and be a weapon for them to go along with Alan Lazard and Sammy Watkins and Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers, and Christian Watson is there as well. I think he's been hurt, so a lot of people have been sleeping on him. Samari Toure, like they got some receivers that I like. It's going to be dependent on who steps up. But you have Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon out of the backfield, like right. So you got a really good offensive line that's left to right: Bakhtiari, Runyon, Myers, Hanson, and Jenkins. Plus, you got a guy like Sean Ryan and Royce Newman and Zach Tom all on the bench waiting in the wings. They could all be taking a spot by season's end. And then on defense, they added Jerron Reed to go with Kenny Clark and Dean Lowry. They got Devontae Wyatt. They added Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, Preston Smith is back. Rashawn Gary is back. They added Quay Walker. They made it a point to re-sign Devondre Campbell, to re-sign Rasul Douglas. They got Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, Eric Stokes. I mean, just an absolutely loaded roster. And they got a solid kicker in Mason Crosby. So it's just really hard for me to bet against the Green Bay Packers, even if they don't have the flashiest of wide receiver rooms. I think they get it done. I think Aaron Rodgers sees his numbers plummet this year. He's just more of a game manager type. And I think that you see them focus a lot on running the football with guys like Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, but I still think the Packers get it done just in a different way than they have in the past. And I have the Packers winning the NFC North. And that leads us to the NFC South. Jessica Tennis says, South is the Bucks unless Brady gets injured from a bad O-line. I have a surprise pick here to win the NFC South. Nick G says, don't sleep on the Saints. I'm gonna go to you, then I'll read the comments, and I'm gonna give my surprise pick to win the NFC South this year.
Very interesting division. The team that's closest to me in proximity here, the Carolina Panthers, have a very, very interesting roster, in my opinion. The problem I have with the Carolina Panthers is I just don't trust Matt Rule as a head coach. And I like what they did in the offensive skill positions in the offseason, right? They went out, they traded for Visca as well recently. They got Robbie Anderson. They have DJ Moore, Baker at the helm. They have a really, really good young defense, but I'm just not ready to crown them over Tom Brady yet. And I do think the Saints are an interesting team with Jameis at the helm. Obviously, no Sean Payton. And how is Jameis going to perform kind of starting for the whole season? Is Michael Thomas going to be healthy? He's already now battling another hamstring injury. They drafted Chris Olave. What's going to happen with Alvin Kamara? Is he going to get suspended? Is he not? They do have a pretty good defense as well. And the Falcons are just a mess right now, right? Mariota's starting. They drafted Ritter. They don't have a ton of talent on that roster, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, we know Calvin Ridley suspended for the year. It's Kyle Pitts and a bunch of guys. So for me, it's still the Bucks with Tom Brady. This might be like the easiest pick for me to make. I know there's maybe the Saints could to make some noise, but it's got to be the Bucks for me still until proven otherwise while Brady's still there.
All right. I like that. I mean, it makes sense. We got some comments coming in here. We got, that's an NFC North one. NFC South from Randy Hartman, Panthers first place. Then Saints, Bucks, and Falcons. We got Caden coming in saying the Bucks. Carl T coming in saying South goes to the Bucks with the Saints getting a wild card. Mike H says the Panthers could be a good upset pick. Randy says the Panthers are going to ride the Baker to Shi Smith connection. He's got to throw in his USC Gamecocks there. And then Pops Mafia comes in and says Panthers crush the Browns with week. Baker has a big day. Adrian Larson says Falcons can be the last year's Lions, lose a lot of games but cover a lot of spreads. So a lot of predictions coming in here. Mike H saying that the Buccaneers interior O-line is scary. I'll tell you what. I went with the Carolina Panthers. I went with the Carolina Panthers to win the NFC North. I think that Baker Mayfield solidifies the quarterback position there. They've got a lot of good skill position guys, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Visca Chenault, Shi Smith, Terrence Marshall. They can run a lot of 12 personnel stuff with Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas. They added Ike Ekwonu and they added Austin Corbett to that offensive line this offseason to sort of solidify it a little bit. Defense, their defensive line is stacked. Matt Ioannidis could have been one of the more sleeper free agent signings of the offseason to go along with Gross Matos, Derek Brown, Brian Burns. Shaq Thompson's a very good linebacker. They're loaded in the secondary with Dante Jackson, JC Horn, Jeremy Chin, Xavier Woods as well. So I'm going with the Carolina Panthers. My two misgivings is their kicker situation. Eddie Pinheiro taking over for the injured Zane Gonzalez. That was a really unfortunate injury for him. And obviously Matt Rule is kind of a funny dude and not like the greatest head coach in the world. So those are my misgivings, but I'm going to overcome those misgivings. And I'm going to say that Baker Mayfield solidifies the NFC North the NFC South for the Carolina Panthers. I think the Saints have just so many different changes this offseason, to their coaching staff and to the roster and all these different things. Jameis working his way back from injury. The Buccaneers are dealing with a lot of injuries and they're dealing with a lot of Tom Brady drama. I think I'm going to have one of those two teams as one of my wild card teams and they could make a push late, but I think Randy says low-key loaded is the 2022 Carolina Panthers. They have a very good roster. So I'm going to take the talent there to win the division. I'm not going to say they're going to make a push in the playoffs, but I think it'll be enough to win the regular season for the Carolina Panthers. All right, on to the division of our opponent this week. The NFC West, you have the Seattle Seahawks starting Geno Smith at quarterback. You have the Arizona Cardinals, who are re-signed Kyler. They got Cliff. They added this offseason. Not a ton. It was mostly just bringing guys back, guys like Zach Ertz. They added Hollywood Brown. They added Trey McBride. So they added some guys early in the draft via trade, Hollywood Brown, and then via the actual draft, Trey McBride. Going with youth on defense, they just added Trayvon Mullen. Then you have the San Francisco 49ers, who are starting Trey Lance. And then you have the LA Rams, who lost a lot of talent, but also brought in some talent, guys like Bobby Wagner, guys like Aaron Robinson. So who are you going with in the NFC West?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's the Super Bowl hangover or whatever you want to call it is real. I mean, teams traditionally don't perform as well the year after, but I'm still not picking against the Rams to win this division. Now, what I will say is I think Seattle is going to be bad. I don't think they're going to be a good team this year. I think that they have to see at some point, I think Drew Lock's going to have to start for that team just to see if they have anything with him. Otherwise, they're going to have to make a quarterback decision going into 2023. The Cardinals are interesting. Like you said, they started out really hot last year, kind of faded. DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games. Obviously, they brought in Hollywood Brown, so they do have some kind of cushion there. And Kyler is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, although a bit polarizing of a figure right now. The Cardinals are a weird team to me. I really like the Niners this year. I think Trey Lance has a chance to be really good quarterback. I think Brandon Ayuk is underrated going into this season as a pair with Debo, and I think George Kittle bounces back as well. We obviously know the 49ers have a really good defense, and Kyle Shanahan, I think in my mind, is one of the he's one of the top coaches in the NFL right now, but it's still the LA Rams division with Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, and that team until I really see that Trey Lance proves himself, until I see a little bit more consistency out of the Cardinals start to finish through an entire season. And that DeAndre Hopkins suspension, I think, sets them back in the early stages of the season. They're going to be playing catch up. So for me, it's the Rams winning the division, but I will have a team from this division in the wild card. So Rams winning the division.
Yeah, Randy Hartman comes in and says NFC West is going to be Niners, then Rams, then Hawks, and then Cardinals. So he has the Seahawks finishing ahead of the Cardinals there. Mike H says Rams. Carl T says Seahawks they stink. They stink. Cardinals get a wild card. 49ers get about 11 wins, and the Rams win the division. So that'll be just about the same as last year. Kyler will be running for his life until Hopkins gets back week 7, says Jessica Tennis. Mike H is not sold on Trey Lance. Nick G says the Rams. Trey isn't going to be as good as hoped. Pops Mafia says Rams. I think Lance will have a learning curve for the Niners. And then Randy Hartman finishes off with anytime you have a great Gamecock wide receiver, you have a chance. Debo carries the 49ers. I went with Nick G says Arizona pays EA a ton of money not to release Call of Duty until February. I like that one. I went with the Rams as well. But I see a lot of people bash on the Cardinals, and I like to bash on the Cardinals as well. But if the Arizona Cardinals stay healthy all season, they're the best team in the division, I think. But they're not going to stay healthy all year, and they're the thinnest team in the division by a mile. Their backups suck. Their backups are disgustingly bad. There's no depth. Any starter goes down, that team crumbles apart because the guy behind him is not good. Like the Arizona Cardinals have no depth whatsoever on their roster. Their starters are really good. I think they could be really competitive. Their backups are trash. So to me, I don't think the Arizona Cardinals can weather a 17-game season. I don't have them winning the division or even making a wild card because of it. And it just goes to show you how bad of a GM that Steve Keim is and how he still has a job is laughable. That's my Arizona Cardinals shot for the day. Being a local here, it drives me nuts to see them kissing the ring of guys like Steve Keim and getting their hopes up for a football team that has no good backups. None. It drives me crazy, some of the homerism that I hear out here on the radio when the team just is not built to withstand a 17-game season. It's nuts. But I'll take the Rams, and then we get into the wild card. I will have another team from the AFC West in the wild card. I like what Seattle's doing minus the quarterback, too. I think they have a pretty talented roster outside of the quarterback. So
I definitely like their draft, but like that quarterback situation is rough right now.
Yeah, I've just been hearing a lot on the radio, and it bugs me to listen to them talk sometimes. Like, and who knows, they could be a wild card team and make the playoffs, but I just don't trust that team if someone gets hurt. like one of their offensive linemen gets hurt, that offensive line falls apart. Kyler Murray missed a ton of games last year. The backup's Colt McCoy. The backup behind James Conner at running back is Eno Benjamin. Like, it's not great. And that's not even talking about the defense, who doesn't have very good backups either. They're not very deep in any position. They can't rotate their defensive linemen. JJ Watt's already struggling to stay healthy. He's been injured, and his backup is Michael Dogby. And then it's Jonathan Ledbetter and Lucky Fotu. Like, they're just not deep on the defensive line. So I just don't trust them to get through a 17-game season. They're a talented football team, starters. They have a good kicker in Matt Prater, a good punter in Andy Lee. Like, they're a good football team. I just don't trust them to survive a 17-game season. They just ain't built for it. All right, on to the wild card. So recap your 4 NFC teams and then give me your 3 wild cards here.
Yep. So got the Eagles winning the East, Packers winning the North, Bucks winning the South, and Rams winning the West. My 3 wild card teams, all from different divisions. I've got the Niners as maybe a surprise wild card to some people making the playoffs. I think Trey Lance has a good enough season. I think the 49ers are a complete enough team. I think they have a really solid roster top to bottom. They're deep. If Trey Lance can do his thing, they can make the playoffs. And to be honest, even if it was Jimmy G, they have a roster that, in my mind, could make the playoffs. And I really trust Kyle Shanahan. I like Kyle Shanahan a lot. I like, the combination they have there with Elijah Mitchell and those other running backs. So, and I also think George Kittle's prime for a bounce back year. So Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, nice complementary pieces to Debo. I like the 49ers getting a wild card. I have the Vikings as a second wild card team. I think the Vikings are a really good roster. I like Kevin O'Connell as a first-year head coach. I think that Adam Thielen is a guy that's perennially underrated, paired with Justin Jefferson. We'll see if Irv Smith can finally kind of break out. I know there's been questions about the Vikings kind of moving to more of that power scheme under O'Connell, whether that be a fit for Dalvin Cook, but I do think that he will thrive in that system, especially as a pass catcher. I think you'll see more of that from Dalvin Cook this year. And I do like some of the draft picks that they've made as well. And I trust, I don't know why, but I just think Kevin O'Connell he gives me a good vibe. So I like the Vikings and Kirk Cousins, again, a guy that gets shit on all the time, but he plays well in the regular season and he gets his team, he gets his team there. So I'll give the Vikings my second wild card spot, and I'm giving the Saints my last wild card spot. I think Jameis showed last year what he could do with proper vision. And I do think that the Saints have a good enough roster. If Michael Thomas even is an 80% of what he was a couple years ago, with Olave there, with Troutman kind of coming into his own, maybe as the other tight end, as the starting tight end there, and they have a good defense already. I like Dennis Allen as a coach. I'm going to give the Saints the last wild card spot, and my first 2 teams out were the Cardinals and the Panthers. So Cardinals just not making it, and the Panthers as an upstart team, but I just think Matt Rule's kind of an idiot, and I don't know that he's a great. I just don't think he's a great in-game manager. I think he makes some questionable moves. I don't know. He doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me as a head coach. So they were out for me, and like I said, the Cardinals were the first team out for me. So I have Niners, Vikings, Saints as my 3 wild card teams.
I had a fantasy draft last night, and I was picking 6th, and there was 2 players on the board, Cooper Kupp and Dalvin Cook. And I really wanted the guy in front of me at pick 5 to take Cooper Kupp so I could take Dalvin Cook at pick number 6, because I think Dalvin Cook's going to be a huge part of their passing game in Minnesota this year, and his numbers are going to blow up. I think Dalvin Cook could be in MVP conversations by the end of the season. Like, I think it's going to be like, imagine if the Los Angeles Rams under Sean McVay for all those years had a Dalvin Cook caliber player running back. Like, I just think that dude's going to be used and abused, and he's going to go off this season under Kevin O'Connell in that offense. So I'm expecting big things from Minnesota. They are one of my wild card teams. We'll get into that in a moment. At first, Jessica Tennis says Saints, 49ers, Vikings. Randy Hartman says Rams, Cowboys, and Packers. Caden says Rams, Packers, Bucks, and Eagles are his division winners, and then Cardinals, Cowboys, and Vikings. Nick G says that Jimmy G takes over week 4 because of injury, and they squeak in. Stephen Burns says people are sleeping on the Saints a little bit. I will be one of them. I'm not going to have them in my playoff format. The Trevor Penning injury is what put it over the edge for me. I just don't know if they can survive with James Hurst taking meaningful reps at left tackle. Wild card for Pops Mafia is 49ers, Packers, and Cowboys. And Carl T coming in saying Eagles, Saints, and Cardinals, with the Cowboys, Packers, Buccaneers, Rams as division winners. So just to recap, my division winners: Eagles, Packers, Panthers, and Rams. My wild card: the Minnesota Vikings, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the San Francisco 49ers squeeze into that last spot. So my 3 teams that I considered putting in, but I left out: the Arizona Cardinals, the Dallas Cowboys, and the New Orleans Saints. So Nick G says Trevor Penning's not playing till November. He had plantar fasciitis in his foot or something like that, or ligament injury. So I think that unless something happened, I don't think he's playing until at least November. I read a report yesterday that it wasn't as bad as they thought, so they think he's going to be back he'll be back in November and can play the second half of the season. So Trevor Penning, unless something changed this morning, he's going to be out a while.
November is everything I'm seeing. So it looks like we were 6 for 7 matching again. You had the Panthers and I had the Saints, but you had the Panthers as a division winner actually, and I didn't even have them making the playoffs. So that'll be I think they have a good roster. I really do. I don't know. I don't trust Matt Rule at all.
All right. So on to the big one here. And we gotta make sure we keep it into a tight 120. We get out of here at the 2-hour mark, maybe, probably not. But Super Bowl. What are your Super Bowl predictions for this season? You give your Super Bowl prediction. We'll read some from the comment section, and then I will give mine. What's your Super Bowl prediction here?
Yep. So Super Bowl prediction is going to be maybe surprise some, same as I made last year. It's the House of Tilton here in the Super Bowl. It is going to be the Bills, and a lot of people are really kind of putting the Packers to the side because of the loss of Devontae Adams, but I'm not going to put them to the side. I know they've come up short in the last 2 NFC Championship games prior to last year, obviously, but obviously losing to the Niners the year prior and then the Bucks the year before that or after that, and they obviously weren't in it last year, but I think people are shitting on the Packers too much. I think Aaron Rodgers is just enough of a dick to prove that, hey, I don't have Devontae Adams. I can still take this team to the Super Bowl. That combination of LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers has worked so well since LaFleur has been there. And I just think even without Adams, they could have guys like Dubs step up. Christian Watson, maybe midway through the season, becomes a reliable guy for them. They've got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon tandem. They've got a good offensive line, and they've got a really good defense as well. I like the Packers. I think they still have a pretty complete roster, and I'm going to put them in the Super Bowl. Maybe stupid to some people, but I'm going to still put them there, and obviously I'm going to take them against the Bills. I think the Bills have the best roster in the NFL. I think they have the best team in the NFL. I think they have a tougher road to get to the Super Bowl than the Packers might because just how good the AFC is. But I think Josh Allen's going to be a front runner for the MVP this season. I think the Bills are going to be talked about as one of the best teams in the league, and they may not start out of the gates white hot, but I think by season's end, the Bills will have amassed plenty of wins, and they will be remembering that 13 seconds until they make it to the Super Bowl and take down the Green Bay Packers. So Bills, Packers, that's my Super Bowl prediction for this year.
Peter King is predicted, I think, the last 4 or 5 Super Bowl winners, and he picked the Buffalo Bills in his Monday morning quarterback or whatever his article now is called for Pro Football Talk. So Peter King had the Bills winning it over, I believe, the Eagles. Caden comes in and says Bills Rams. Andy Larson says Bills Eagles. My Jessica Tennis, no, they're talking about Trevor Penning here. Sorry. Randy Hardman says Bills Vikings. That would be an interesting one. The both teams that have been to and lost 4 Super Bowls. Nick G says Bills Bucks. We send Tommy into the sunsets. Bills and Vikings let one of them finally win a Super Bowl. Says Pop's Mafia. Going to go the James Cook Bowl, right? So it'll be the Vikings James Cook Bowl. Stephen Burns not buying Aaron Rodgers. He says when Aaron Rodgers proves in the playoffs, it'll be the first time in almost a decade. Mike H is thinking Packers versus Chargers. Carl T, Bills win over Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Tom Brady again loses, retires, and passes that torch on to Josh Allen. Allen in Arizona, says Nick G. The Boomer Bowl, says Jessica Tennis, 49ers and Bills.
Classic.
I am going to go with what is seemingly a very popular pick amongst a lot of people. So I'm kind of a copycat. It's not very original, but I'm going to go with the Bills versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's the Eagles. I really like what Nick Sirianni has built there. I think he's got the weapons to put up some points. And I really like the additions that they made to the defense, both in the secondary and the pass rush. Adding guys like Jordan Davis up front and some of the other guys that they added. I'm blanking on the guy from Arizona and Carolina off the edge, Son Reddick off the edge, and they added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and they added James Bradbury. So just a lot of talent. They got a good offensive line. They got some good skill position players, and they got what I think is a good young coach, Nick Sirianni. So I'm going with Bills versus Eagles. Bills over Eagles. The expectation this year has got to be Super Bowl. Am I right? Like it's Super Bowl or bust, I think, for the Buffalo Bills. Yep. A lot of people will say, like, hey, it can be a successful season if we don't make it to the Super Bowl, we make it to the championship game again. It'll be a successful season if we make it to the Super Bowl but lose, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, like
you only get so many chances.
Get so many chances. So for the next 2, 3, 4 years, that's gonna be the prediction on every show. Every show we do every year, unless something drastically changes, unless Josh Allen falls off a cliff. Last year we picked the Bills. This year we picked the Bills. We're going to pick the Bills again next year. Like that, because that's the expectation. We're Bills fans, and that's the expectation. So, and we got J-Dub coming in late with the Bills cards. Host City keeps starting their team. So he's picking the Bills Cardinals Super Bowl. Be interesting in my household with a bunch of in-laws who are Cardinals fans. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking with us. This is a throwback to draft season. I didn't even realize we went 2 hours tonight.
It's a good one.
We'll make a quick exit here. I won't even ask you any final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts quickly?
No, we're good. We're at a tight 120 here.
All right. So, hey, before you head out, smash that like button. It really helps us out with the algorithm. If you're watching on demand, thank you for sticking with us this long. Smash that like button, leave a comment. We'll try to get to it over the course of the week. Please share. If you enjoy the Air Raid Hour, you enjoy the Air Raid Hour experience, click that share button, copy the link, and text to someone you think might enjoy the Air Raid Hour as well. Word of mouth is the number one thing that we hope grows this show organically for years to come. And as always, if you can't catch us live and you don't like YouTube for whatever reason, you can catch us on demand audio by searching Air Raid Buffalo on all major podcasting platforms. We will see you Thursday for the pregame. We haven't hammered down a time yet, but we will, and we'll post that on our social media, and we'll set the premiere for it. We'll be live. We'll be doing our 26 shirt giveaway for all the super chatters from the past month on Thursday as well. So football is back. The Bills and the Rams, the primetime kickoff to the season. So until next time, and we will see you Thursday, a short 3 days away. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?